We were formed in 1969 as a genuine partnership between church and state to deal with those most fantastic of historic church buildings which no longer had a community, a viable worshipping community. But the buildings were too important to be knocked down, to be converted to other uses. And since 1969, we've collected 356 of these fantastic buildings right across England. And we take on about 2 or 3 more every single year. We don't know what the impact of COVID might be. It might be that buildings continue to close for regular worship, and there might be more of a push to not have them as regular places of worship, and there might be a bigger demand on our services, or it could be that there are alternative routes found for the future of these buildings. But on our latest strategy, which we started in 2019, this picture we, rather than write a big strategy document, we actually drew a picture because we thought it would be easier to explain what we do. But as you can see, our central idea is how we empower and support communities to care for historic places of worship. The central idea of this is that we want communities to use and love these buildings for whatever ways they can. They're well known as being useful for places of Christian worship, but also they're great venues to bring people together when there isn't a global pandemic on, for theatre, beer festivals, eating cake, music, all sorts of different reasons. And we've got a network of staff across the country who support these kind of works. We also have a number of commercial activities that we undertake. We invented champing, which is church camping, and we're taking bookings right now for your socially distanced local holidays if you want to. So check out champing.co.uk to see where you want to stay in one of these fabulous churches over the summer. It is quite a unique experience and very, very comfy and an interesting way of visiting churches. We have a consultancy business. We have a maintenance business where we look after other people's historic places of worship as well as our own. And the other element is we really want to promote the value of our shared cultural heritage, because we're concerned that potentially these buildings being so important, religions become quite divisive. And actually, it means that sometimes people don't engage with them because they're worried about what they mean and what these buildings are. And we want to share these buildings. These are one of the most fantastic cultural assets this country has. And they are the most profound buildings in their relationship to place, and also the most democratic because they do belong to absolutely everybody. And we want to encourage everyone to use them. So that's what we do. Although we have a membership scheme as well, I would support tonight you joining, if you haven't already, the Friends of St. Peter's. That's a good thing to do. But check out our lecture series as well on a Thursday lunchtime. I think this week's about some archaeology in Wales as well, which is really, really quite interesting. But we have a very varied mix ourselves. So Thursday lunchtimes at 1 o'clock, you can check out our lecture series there as well. So the pub. What I'm going to say is, this is proving to be possibly the world's most expensive toilet, because I'm not insinuating the pub as a toilet, but what we started off with in this building was looking at how we'd engage communities to use this building into the future. And actually, one of the needs is that people like to have a loo and running water. Now, actually, what happened was we actually started planning how we would get a loo into this site. And it's very, very difficult because St. Peter's, Northampton is one of the finest Norman churches in the country. It is an outstanding example of Romanesque architecture. And if you've never been into this building, make sure you find a way in, because it is an incredible interior. Very rich carvings throughout the building. And to put a loo in there is quite a challenge, even to the most, well, it's just quite a challenge because you wouldn't want to ruin the space that's inside. But there's a pub next door. So we started thinking along the lines of, actually, could we use the pub to support the use of the church building? And what happened was we got a bit carried away, and there was a new scheme put up by what was then the Heritage Lottery Fund, which is now the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And they were very innovative, and they still are, but they were very innovative at that point, and they had a scheme that was called a Heritage Enterprise. And so we applied for this scheme, and we were one of the first people to get a successful application. And then you'll ask the question of why has it taken us so long, but I'll come on to that a bit later on. So let me start the presentation for you, so you don't have to look at me. I think that's the most important thing about this. Let's see how that looks. Can everyone see that okay? Jean, do you want to give me a thumbs up if you've got it? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
That's super.
Brilliant. So in this talk, basically, and before I start as well, I'd just like to thank Hannah Parham, who really helped me put this together. So I wouldn't have been able to do it without her. So thank you, Hannah, for your help in doing this. So what we're going to go through is the history of Marefair and the Old Black Lion, a description of the present situation, proposals for the future, and then we have got some questions at the end. And now I'm going to try and move this on. There we go. Great. So Marefair is close to the castle and near to the site of the Saxon Palace and later of St. Peter's Church. And it's long been a prominent thoroughfare in Northampton. Archaeological investigations have revealed an early to mid-Saxon settlement here. And there's been a lot of excavation, as I'm sure that a lot of you are aware, around this site. Marefair was actually an extension of Gold Street, was known as Gold Street, and was the primary west-east route through the thriving medieval town, with much of the present street layout dating from this time. Excavations have shown it to be rich in medieval remains that are typical of intensive urban occupation. This includes streets fronted by buildings with associated yards behind, used for a variety of industrial processes. Now, Northampton, I've always think, is pretty unlucky, because in 1516 was the first of two catastrophic fires, and I quote, "The greatest part of the town was laid waste by a devastating fire which destroyed much of the timber frame building stock." John Leyland, 1503 to 1552, noted on a visit some 17 years later that some older buildings of stone still stood, and new construction was exclusively of wood. The area shown here is in 1611. Now, if I can move my cursor, we can try and find where St. Peter's is. St. Peter's, if you can see my cursor here, is marked by an S, and to its west are the tenements, most likely timber framed or half timbered. Some of the building fabric at the Old Black Lion has been dated to the 16th century. This includes the stonework to the lower levels of the east elevation and 2 chimney stacks. So on this plan, what you can see is the Old Black Lion as it is today, with the earliest surviving fabric identified in blue. This dates to the 16th century and is all in stone and on the lower story of the building, suggesting that the Old Black Lion was originally a half-timbered building with a timber-framed upper story to the stone base. The dotted lines show that the building originally extended further into Marefair, something suggested by the evidence of the surviving timber roof. The 2 square shapes that you can see are chimney breasts, which are made of stone and survive to this day. So these are the chimney breasts here, and you can see the blue is pretty obvious. I hope that makes sense to you. So, Northampton, unlucky in fires again. 1675, the most famous fire. This devastated the town centre, the centre of Northampton, and much of the town had to be rebuilt. This time, they learnt their lesson, it seems, because they were using brick and stone instead of timber. Now, it's likely that the Old Black Lion was entirely rebuilt in stone at this time, having, as we said before, originally been half timbered. The first record we have of a public house on this site is a notice dating to 1722 in the fine publication that was the Northamptonshire Mercury. And I reveal now that it was advertising a horse. So, and in 1729, there was also a cockfight at the pub, which was reported. In fact, the horse, sorry, I think the horse was a fine stallion that someone was trying to flog. I suppose it was like used cars at the time, for horses. So the same sort of advertising didn't change for some time. But in 1729, there was a cockfight at the pub. Now, this is really interesting because it sort of reinforces, if you want to use this lens, that the pub is a place for everyone in the community to gather. It wasn't just the common folks that were here. So I'm going to just give you a quote of what it said. At the Black Lion in Gold Street, Northampton, on Tuesday, the 6th of January next, will be fought a cock match between Sir Arthur Hazelrig, Bart, and Charles Gore, Esquire, MP, to show 12 pair of cocks on a side for 5 guineas a battle and 20 guineas the odd battle. There will be cocks ready to match and to fight any others that shall be brought to the Black Lion aforesaid, there being pens and a feeder ready to attend for that purpose. Note, there will also be very good ordinary. Now, ordinary was food and drink served at the bar. So it's a good business prospect, I assume, for this. By the late 18th century, the pub was put up for sale, and this 1771 is the first time that we have a description of the building and its land. This included a large stable in the close with loft over the same, and also a messuage or tenement adjoining the last mentioned close in the occupation of Mr. Tomlinson. While buildings have changed, these features are actually still traceable in the fabric of the building that's there today, where there is the stable in the courtyard or close with an upper loft and what was a separate dwelling at number 3 Black Lion Hill. This is a map from 1810 which shows the area on the eve of a great change brought by the Industrial Revolution. At this time, you can still see that the castle is identifiable, and rural development, but the urban development did not extend much beyond the Nen, with meadows and pasture surrounding the town. This slide is here to demonstrate the changes that took place in the 18th century to the building. The pub was refronted, as shown in red. There's still a clear line in the stonework on the eastern elevation overlooking the churchyard where this rebuilding can be traced. The roof was also changed. It would have previously had a gable end to the street, so the gable end is sort of like this, sort of a triangle as onto the street, and this is replaced by a hip roof, which is a slanting roof that's there today. New chimney stacks were also added at this time, and we've put those in this plan in black. The inn was a typical coaching inn with a large arch in the main frontage through which there was access to a courtyard. Here were stables with accommodation above, access via external staircases, and this is a form found all over the country. I've got some examples here. Here's some examples of what the courtyards may have looked like before. The old Black Lion's carriage arch was later filled in, as I expect you've realised, but we have photographic evidence of what it looked like. Oh, sorry, I've got that. I've sort of conflated those two things. Number 3 Black Lion Hill was a separate dwelling at the time with 2 rooms per floor and an attic in the space in the roof spaces. So there's just this is the Ordnance Survey map of 1885, and here you can see the dramatic shift there is. So let's just go back to that previous map here of 1810 and look here at the complete change you see in Northampton, which is quite considerable. Towards the end of the 18th century, the inn had gone through difficult times, and it was advertised for sale again in 1771. And again, for 5 consecutive years, the property failed to sell. We're seeing a pattern of history here as we come into the future. Again, the Northampton Mercury was on hand to describe the pub in 1782 as the late Black Lion, rather than the old Black Lion. It was the late, so it clearly died. This may indicate that it wasn't used as a hostelry for some time. And the final date it was advertised for sale was in 1776 until 1859, when there are no references in the records to the old Black Lion. The Northampton Mercury, previously billing the hostelry on a regular basis, had fallen silent. The census returns for 1841 and 1851 shed light on this situation. The occupants are listed as George Cornfield, maltster, and his niece Jane. In 1851, the same gentleman is listed, who, at the venerable age of 85, is described as a maltster and a corn merchant. There is no mention of a landlord, a licensed victualler, or innkeeper. The situation only changed with the transformation of the area of Gold Street by the railway arriving in 1859, which you can see, I hope, just here. This is the railway station here. And the growth of Northampton at this period was huge, and many more areas became much more industrial, and it didn't do very good for the castle site, as this was flattened effectively to put the railway station there. By the census return for 1861, John Roddice is at the Black Lion and described as an innkeeper. So the fortunes of the pub are turned by having this great communication link nearby. The Black Lion is again a pub, and the Northampton Mercury, you'll be pleased to know, began to run a whole new run of adverts. In 1859, John Roddice advertised in the Northampton Mercury to inform his friends and the public generally that he had opened the above inn, where every accommodation would be afforded, wines and spirits of the finest quality, good stabling and lock-up coach houses, home brewed, Burton and other ale. Sounds very appealing. The revival is likely to have been connected with the new trade at the railway station. Changes were made to the building, probably at or around this time, including new stable doors and fittings, cobbled and brick floors to the stables and yard, and these still survive today. If you look at this picture, you can see the attic windows in number 3. There's someone sat in the window up here. Can you just make them out? These are later removed. So they're there, but they're later removed and not there. The chimneys on the roofline show where they originally were hearths on the ground floor of the pub, and these are shown in black on the previous plan that I showed. So these are where chimneys are, and the hearths are underneath. These have long since gone on the ground floor, which had been cleared through to become much more open plan. Throughout the 19th century, most notably under the management of John Roddice, his wife Amy, and later his son, also John, the Black Lion, the old Black Lion, flourished, providing lavish dinners to societies and clubs such as the Northampton Friendly Society, when about 40 or 50 members sat down to an excellent dinner served by host Roddice. And the gas fitters' annual meeting, fitters and others employed of the Northampton Gas Company sat down to an excellent supper at the old Black Lion. To quote, "It is needless to say justice was done to the good things provided by the worthy host, Mr. Roddice. The cloth being drawn, the second part of the programme commenced and was carried on with spirit. After the usual loyal toasts, etc., the evening was spent in the choice of vocal and instrumental music by some of the company. Altogether, it was a most successful gathering hereto held." So a ringing endorsement for the hospitality of the old Black Lion. The inn also provided refreshments for social gatherings further afield, such as fetes, Sunday schools, and garden parties. Mr. Roddice also took to providing wines, ales, and spirits at the Northampton races. In an advertisement in the Northampton Mercury in 1883, Mr. Roddice begs to inform his numerous friends and the public in general that he has taken to the wooden stand on the racecourse, where he hopes to meet with the same patronage hitherto so kindly bestowed on him. Admission 2 shillings and 6pence each day, or 2 tickets for 4 shillings. Wines, ales, and spirits of the finest quality at bar prices. What a salesman he clearly was. John Roddice the Elder died in 1869. His daughters contributed towards the restoration of one of the four windows in the north aisle of St. Peter's Church, with their dedication to his memory written below. In 1881, his wife Amy, who had managed the inn after John Roddice's death, sold the freehold to Castle, later to become Phipps Brewery. In the 20th century, the pub was refurbished by Phipps, who added the tiles to the outside and changed the windows from the traditional sashes shown in the previous photograph to these leaded lights, which have since been replaced in turn to timber sashes again. The interior in this phase of works had parquet flooring and plank panelled walls, fragments of which still survive. You can see the Phipps sign on this photo from the 1960s and the carriageway through the courtyard with the doors closed. Number 3, Old Black Lion Hill, appears to be boarded up. Soon it was to be amalgamated into the footprint of the Old Black Lion. Here's an aerial view, which dates to the period between the unveiling of the First World War memorial in the churchyard, probably in the 1920s, and in the 1960s, when much of the historic townscape of Northampton was destroyed. It's the only evidence we have for the appearance of the rear elevations of the Old Black Lion. It shows the wider historical setting of the church and pub, much of which has since been lost. It also shows the external staircases to the upper floors and the loading bay in the south gable of the pub for taking in hay to the hayloft. The now demolished lean-to building to the rear of number 3 Black Lion Hill is also shown, along with the chimney stack. So we can see this here, if you can see my cursor. And here's the rear elevation of the pub here. And obviously this is the church, and there's still a row of trees here. And you can see this is Seoul Central somewhere here, I think. So as you can see, the townscape transforms in the second half of the 20th century. More open space is provided, the urban grain is lost, but it isn't really enjoyed or much overused. I think that this area of St. Peter's Green became a car park at some point when they drove through St. Peter's Way here. And I'm sure some people in the audience will know if that's the case or not. And I think these steps relate back to that, when it was a car park. I think I saw it on one of the OS maps from the period. And you see that the fine urban grain of all these individual houses. There were streets over here. Remember, there was development over here, and then suddenly this gives way to these much bigger developments, and you lose the sense of what was there. But we still got, as you can see, and you're probably aware if you're in Northampton, there's Hazelrig House is still down here. These are crucial parts of historic Northampton that are here. And this, unfortunately, is the sad situation that the building finds itself in today. The pub is closed, it's in really poor condition. And this effectively is the first sign of hospitality as you come out of the railway station. So it's not really a great description of Northampton itself. The pub's also been a centre for criminal activity, which is not particularly good. And this is what we're really trying to address in the project that we've put forward. Also, we think the condition of the pub and how it's used has a direct impact on the setting of the church, and the church being a risk, because if there were more derelict buildings nearby, that clearly puts the building at risk. And in February this year, there was a break-in as someone decided that smashing a 19th century piece of stained glass was the right way to get into this building. There's nothing to steal in the building, but just causes a lot of trouble and a lot of damage. And thanks to the Friends, we got early warning of this, and they provided these photographs and dealt with the police. So we're very, very grateful to them for everything they've done. So also the issue as it is today is that we can't open St. Peter's Church every day. It's usually kept locked, which is such a shame because it's such a fantastic building. The church has no toilets or hospitality facilities. The costs of looking after this building are actually quite high because of the nature of the building. There's what's called a conservation heating system in here. So there has to be a background temperature kept to prevent any form of mold growing in the building as well. And there's no real regular income. We're really pleased that the Friends are really gearing up and they're doing lots and everything they can. The pandemic didn't help them with sort of coming back to life again, but we hope that it's going to be used a lot more. But as you can see, it's a difficult building in a tricky location to keep going. Oh, I've missed a slide somewhere, I think. Right. Okay, but I mean, really, one of the issues really is that, how do we get this building working again? And as I described before, we were looking for ways to do this quite some time ago, and actually the pub becomes something of a brilliant idea because it becomes the hospitality for this thing. Imagine we can get these two historic assets to work together. That is fundamental to its success and really, really, really key. It's all about what we would call placemaking. How do you make the most of these assets to really, really make sure that things can work together? What we're really grateful for is that Northampton Borough Council, now West Northamptonshire Council, bought the freehold of this site. Part of the issue with this building was it was difficult to acquire the building from the former freeholders. And the business model they had wasn't really geared towards getting the best sort of settlement for the place, and they didn't invest very much in the buildings. What's fantastic news as well is that West Northamptonshire Council has won 25 million from £25 million from the Future Towns Fund from the Treasury. And this does include some more money for the Old Black Lion as well. This is time limited funding, which is going to be invested well. And it's a real boost for Northampton Town Centre. I'm really excited that the town got this money. And I think it's much needed and can make a huge difference to the place where we live. There are proposals for new mixed use development and a heritage park on Marefair and restoring some of the historic grain of the town. So it's important that we can get back Marefair to get this idea of getting some of the character back with this broad mix of uses, including the urban grain and high quality green spaces. So what's the future for the Old Black Lion? Well, as it says on this slide, we really want to restore the Old Black Lion as a proper pub. And once again, it could be a popular public house in the centre of a community. And we're exploring the possibilities of using some of the courtyard buildings. Now, what's really important here is that we've been working with an organisation called the Central Council for Church Bell Ringers. Now, you may have come across them or you may have not have, but they have somewhere in the region of 35,000 members across the country. And I've learned an awful lot about change bell ring is something that's very distinctly English and an incredible thing. And there is a lot of people out there who love ringing bells. Northampton Town Centre is blessed with 4 sets of very good quality church bells. And the Central Council Church Bell Ringers are looking for a central location to do something to focus on some of their archive and also to create a national training centre. And we're working very hard with them to bring them to the pub because we think it's an ideal location. As those of you who are bell ringers and those of you who know bell ringers, there's a great synergy between bell ringing and drinking beer, fortunately. So it's a match made in heaven, I think. So it's a really important part and could really be a great use which helps support the development of the business case here. Now, clearly, we're really grateful for all the help we've had. So we've got the National Lottery Heritage Fund, we've got the Architectural Heritage Fund and West Northamptonshire Council, among others, who've been extremely helpful and generous in supporting this project with their funding. And it all makes a big difference because it's taken us such a long time to get to this point. So what's the future for the pub? So we've been working hard with our architects, OMI and Crosby Granger, who've been developing proposals to really sensitively conserve these buildings because they're grade 2 listed in their own right. They sit adjacent to a scheduled ancient monument and a grade 1 listed building. So they need to be very carefully considered, but at the same time they need to be able to deliver a proper commercial business, basically, that's got to be a place that appeals to the community where people are going to come and spend their money on the hospitality that's offered. So here you can see what it looks like, some numbers. All these numbers relate to conservation works that are required because we're going to have to do a lot of repair to this building and remove some of the bad things that have been done to this building, like using cement repairs to fix holes in the roof and solve the problem of damp on the eastern wall, which bounds the churchyard. I mean, there's a lot wrong with the building and it does need this big investment to bring it right up to scratch where it deserves to be. So as you can see here, here's some of the key features that we've got. So we're going to give you tonight a sneak preview of the plans. And what I can say is we've never shown these to the public before. In fact, some of these drawings only arrived on our desks this afternoon. So you are the first people to see these. But before we go on there, so what I'll be able to show you here is that we're going to have a new carriage entrance, which will feature setback glazed walls, which I'll show you a bit of detail in on the next slide, so that the historic route through the carriageway is appreciable. But a courtyard is actually safe for children and pets and is screened from the noise and pollution of the road. The site plan also shows the new connection between the churchyard and the refurbished pub, because what we want to do is make sure that we can use the church as a venue which is supported for events from the pub, which would be a great thing for it to be done. And it's really important that there's a link between the two things. However, it's really complicated because we're going to do some archaeological investigative works in the churchyard, and there will be buried remains, and there's a lot of archaeology on this site. So we have to deal with these things very carefully and very sensitively. Apart from the new path and the gate and the churchyard wall, the proposals won't actually affect the fabric of St. Peter's Church at all, but it is hoped that we can use it, as I said before, as a venue, and we can host a much wider range of activities and functions as the two buildings are used together and can support each other. Because on the most basic of levels, it will provide us with an opportunity to keep the doors open on St. Peter's, and hopefully people will come into the town, have a lovely meal in the old Black Lion, and the first place they're going to visit is going to be St. Peter's Church, and then they've got easy access to the castle site, and they can move on into the town centre as well. So here we go. Here's a really detailed plan for you to get your hands around. But really, what the focus of this work is, in a fully restored old Black Lion, this is the ground floor that you're looking at here. So what we've got is lots of spaces for dining, but there's also lots of space to have a quick coffee or just pop in for a pint. There's a courtyard beer garden. There's a covered beer garden here. There's another beer garden just here, and this is really taking advantage of what is a sheltered south-facing site. There's a function room for the community use on the first floor, and the blue higher space that you can see at the bottom, I've lost my cursor, there it is, the blue higher space there is space that we think that we're hoping that the Central Council for Church bell ringers are going to take. We're going to retain as much of the original fabric as possible and reinstate that carriageway view, as we said before. So that, and you can see that just here. So the glazed partitions go here. So it looks, you can see the courtyard entrance there, and it means you can move between number 3 Black Lion Hill and the pub itself. If people like these plans, we're going to go for planning permission and listed building consent very, very soon. And you can help us if you choose to, and we'd be really, really grateful if you could write to support us, write to the local planning authority to support these applications, because it does make a big difference. We're really excited to be working closely with the Friends, and it's really kind of them to host us today so that we could talk about this project as we realise this unique and transformational project. There'll be lots happening soon, including archaeological investigations in the churchyard, so watch this space, and we'll be doing lots of public consultation. So please keep in touch with us, and we'll keep in touch with you. This is a really big experiment for the CCT, and it's quite a step forward in what we're doing. It's a bit of a change from what we've done before, because what we're trying to do is trying to bring back a historic asset in the pub, to bring it back to work mutually with the church to support the use of the church into the future. So not only will the church be able to be open and used as a function room, a venue, and events and hosted things will be able to be supported by the pub. We're really, this pub is, the idea is for it to make a profit that can then go into the work we have supporting historic churches right across the country. Using these two assets together, maybe this will be a blueprint for us. If it works, we can try and work out whether it's possible to repeat this across the country as well. We don't know whether that's the case at the moment, but there's something in the idea of an asset adjacent to the historic building, which will help the historic churches become much more sustainable into the future. And just again, I'd like to say a huge thank you to the funders of this, the Architectural Heritage Fund, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, who've stuck by this project for an awfully long time, to their great credit, and we hope you're going to continue to stick by it, because we've made so much progress in the last year. And West Northamptonshire Council, who've been superb throughout this project as well, and really believed in the vision that we put forward here.